So we understand databases now, the basic structure and setup, how they work. Let's get into Bubble's database and build our own super simple database, just so we get an idea of how Bubble works with databases. For our purposes, we'll be building a basic form where a user can come onto our website, enter their name, and enter their favorite food. It's going to be a super basic example, just so you understand how it works. And then as we build projects together, we'll do much more complex things with it and get really in depth. But for now, let's just touch on databases in Bubble. On the left side of your screen here, you'll see all the options. So we've been through design, workflow, and now we are on data. In data types is where we're going to be starting, and this is where you're going to be crafting your database. You can see Bubble already has a predefined user table here with a couple records already input. This is going to be fine for our use cases. However, we will expand upon this in later lessons. For now, though, let's create a new table. To do that, we'll just type down here in new type, and we're going to call this table form. And we'll go ahead and click create. Now you can see the type name is form, and it automatically has the same fields here. But we need to create a new field. Now, what do we want to store in our form table? Well, we're probably going to want the name of the person who submitted it. And for field type, you can click this drop down and assign it a type. You can see there's a bunch of different options right now. We're not going to cover all of them right now. But for this, we'll select text. So you come to basic types, select text and name, and text will be what we put in those input fields, and we'll create. The next thing we're going to want to have is a field where they can input their favorite food, for example. So we'll say favorite food. And then for the field type, it's also going to be text. So we'll create. And now we have a super basic database where we have a user and a form. But that's all we need to make this work, and so you can see how it works in Bubble. Now that we have that created, let's go over to app data and see our tables in action. So we have all of our users, and this is the information that we're going to be collecting for all of our users, as well as all of our forms. And this is the information. You can see we have favorite food, the name. We can also move this around. So if we want name to be in front, just select it and move it over. So now we have name, favorite food, and then the other information that Bubble has already given us. Let's come to design. Let's actually get something input in those fields. We'll come over and select one of our elements over here, and we're not going to worry too much about UI or how it looks. We're just going to worry about the functionality here. So bear with me on how it looks, but we'll do our best. So we'll have a group in the middle. Make it about this size, and we'll put it in the middle. So let's come to our parent. And for the layout, we'll just do align to parent. And that way we can center it. Let's also give it a color just so we can see where it's at on the page. Again, just to be quick, we'll detach the style. And we'll come to background style and give it a color. Perfect. Now we can see what we are working with. Now let's give the form a name so people know what the form actually is. So we'll come up here and give a text box some text, and we'll say, what is your favorite food? Perfect. So now we have a text box in there. It says, what is your favorite food? Let's actually change the alignment of this group A to be a column. So you can see it's snapped to the left. Let's actually have it snap to the middle. So we'll come to layout, and we will select a horizontal alignment of center. Great. Now we have it centered, and it says, what is your favorite food? Great. Now below that, we're going to have another group. This is where we're going to come into that layering of groups. So you're going to be seeing this more and more as we continue, and you'll see why in a second. We'll have another group in here. And inside this group, we're going to have a text as well as an input. So we'll have a text, and then we'll also come and select a input. Great. Now in a second, you're going to see why we put this group inside of the group itself and why we didn't just put all of the elements under the same group. We want the title, this group, the next group, and the next group to be in a column form. However, inside the groups, we want them to be in a row. That's why we have to separate them out in their own individual groups to give them different alignments. So in this group, we're going to select row. Right now it's fixed. We'll select a row, and you can see what happens. They're in a row, However, these elements are in a column together. That's important to understand, and that's why you want to keep them in their own individual groups as much as you can, just to organize things and give you tons of flexibility. So now let's change this edit me to say enter your name. Like so. So it says enter your name, type here. Let's change type here to just say name. And so what are we going to do next? Well, we need to make another group that captures the food. But instead of coming over here and dragging another group and doing what we just did all over again, simply click it, copy it, and paste it right below. This is going to save you tons of time. Instead of going back and redoing what you just did all over again, simply copy and paste, and then we can change what it says. So instead of enter name, enter your favorite food. Just like that, and then we can change this to food. And you can see just how fast we're able to do this. Now, if you run into a developer who's like, oh, I can code a lot faster. No, you can't. If I were to write that code out, it would take me 5 minutes, and this took me 2 seconds. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. Don't let some software engineer come to you and say, why are you learning no code? That's not scalable. You can do it much faster and much more with code. It's simply incorrect. They're stuck in their ways, but you're not, since you're a futurist. So let's keep building out our form. Below this, we're going to want somewhere where the user can click a button and it submits the information that they input. So this will be simple. We come over and drag a button over right below. And then we're going to want to center that button. Also, this color is disgusting, so let's just change that real quick. We'll come to primary. Just make it a lighter blue. Looks a lot better. And then we'll change this to submit. So we have it centered. We have our super ugly form, but it doesn't matter because all we're focused on for now is the database structure and the functionality associated. But what's the next thing we need to do? So if we click preview, let's see what happens. I enter a name. I enter my favorite food. And I click submit. Well, obviously nothing's going to happen. Nothing's hooked up. You can see that the fields work and we can type stuff in, but nothing happens when you click submit. So let's go back into our editor and look at how we can make this function. Well, what are we looking to function? The button is what's going to hold all of the functionality. Really what the input fields are doing is just collecting a piece of data but not doing anything with it. We know what the information will be once it's input, but you have to be able to do something with it once they hit the submit button. So let's come into our workflow. So we'll add a workflow. So when button submit is clicked, what happens? Well, now that we have a database, we can start sending data to that database. So we'll come to data. That's where all of your database actions are going to happen. Come to data things, and what are we going to do? Well, we're going to create a new thing. It's a new record, and you can see here, type. Now that looks familiar. If we click it, we can see, oh, there's our form, what we just created in our database. So great, that's easy to set up. So what happens when they create a form? Well, there's two things that need to happen. We need to update the name of whoever entered the form, as well as the favorite food. So how do we do that? Well, simple. We set another field. But before we click set another field, I want you to notice this add all fields down here. Usually when you're creating a new thing, the best practice is to add all of the fields instead of just individual fields. Let's do that. Let's add all of the fields, and you can see it populates the two things that we gave it. Magic. Name and favorite food. Now we want the favorite food to equal whatever the user input in that input field. But let's pause for a moment. How do we get the favorite food to equal whatever the user input? I don't recall us naming the input field. How do we even know what it is? Well, if you click on it, you get a bunch of options, right? You come down to elements, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for what element it was. You can see the problem you run into when you do not label things properly. What we have here is a button submit, a group A. What is that? A group B, no clue. Group C, no idea. So that is why it's so important to label everything you're doing. Because when you get a ton more data, it's going to be way more complex. So it's very important that you label stuff correctly. However, you can guess based on what we put in the input field, which one's food, which one's name, but that's not best practice and you don't want to be doing that. So let's come back and look at our input name. So this is going to be the name input, and we'll call this the food input. That way it's super clear and there'll be no mistakes made, especially if you have working with multiple developers in the same app. You need to be on the same page with your naming conventions. So let's go back to the workflow. And we'll create a new form, go back to that. Now in favorite food, all we'll do is put the food input here, and you'll get a couple more options, and they're known as states. So we have value is valid. So if I click valid, you'll get more options, and we don't want to get into that right now. It'll just confuse you at this stage, so don't even worry about those. All we want to do is get the value. So we'll have the food inputs value. We'll select that as equal to favorite food, and we're going to do the same thing for name. So we'll come down, find our name input, we'll select value, and that is how easy it is to build a simple form where users can input information and you can input it into your database. So let's see that in action. Let's see if it actually works. So we'll come to our design. We'll go to preview. We'll come here and we'll put our information in. Now we'll click submit. Nothing happened. But did it? Let's go back. Let's go back to our database and see if anything's there. Okay, something did happen. So now you can see that we have my name and my favorite food in our table. But why is that? So the thing you have to understand with software development is even if your functionality is perfect, if the user is having a poor experience or they don't see stuff happening on the page, they're going to be very unhappy and they're going to have questions for you. Oh, why isn't this working? And you don't want that. So when you're doing stuff in the back end, you have to make sure that you're updating the front end to reflect. Meaning if we submit something, we have a pop-up that says you submitted this or success or updated. Something that lets the user know that something happened, even though we know that something is happening in the background. That's something we're going to cover in a little bit, but for now, just keep that in the back of your head when you're thinking about how the user is going to interact with your web application. Let's go back to our data types and see what we may have left out. So let's come to form and check it. So we have name and favorite food, but we're missing something. What are we missing? We're missing the user. How are we associating this form back to the user? Well, we're not. So we have no way of knowing what user is identified with that form. So let's update that. Let's create a new field, and we'll call this the user. Now for the field type, instead of going down to your basic types, we want to associate this to a type we already have existing and created, meaning our user. This means we're going to be able to get all the information associated with the user inside of the form table. This is going to be very important when displaying data back to the user. But we're not done there. Now that we've added user to our form, we also have to come to our user and add a form. So we'll create new field. We'll call this form. And we'll select the field type as form and create. Now we have a direct correlation or relationship with our form and our user. So we can get information from both parties back and forth and be able to display them on our front end. This is going to be very important for the next lesson as we're going to be displaying what we just put in the database back to the user. So stay tuned for that. You're doing awesome. Let's keep moving.